Awesome. Welcome everyone to the Better Impact demo today. So we're looking at, is Better Impact the right platform for your organization to manage your volunteers? My name is Didier Stobart. I'm the software sales advisor at Better Impact. So I've been working over 10 years in technology, helping and advising organizations on their digital platform. Got extensive knowledge of Better Impact software, and how organizations can transition with ease and get the most out of the system. Also joining us today from Better Impact is Andy Fryer. Andy is the operations manager for Better Impact in Oceania. He'll be answering your questions in the chat, so feel free to ask away as we go. Also very excited to introduce Carolyn Pickering from the Nature Foundation. She's been kind enough to join us today and share her journey with the software. So Carolyn, just a quick introduction.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm glad you can join us today, and I hope that I'm able to offer some insight from how Better Impact has helped Nature Foundation and the other organisations that I've worked with over the last 10 years with, and since 2018 using Better Impact. So let's look forward to presenting some information and sharing some ideas with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. Carolyn's what we call in our organisation a super user. So she uses the platform really well and definitely gets the most out of that for her organisation. Now, a couple of takeaways what we're looking at today. So we're going to have a look at some common problems facing volunteer service teams. We're also going to do a quick program assessment. So basically, I'm going to ask 3 questions out to the audience. You'll just need to answer in the chat. I'll let everyone know what those answers are so we can get an idea of common issues, common challenges in the industry. Also, why the right software tools matter. Myself and Carolyn will be looking at some of the different features of the software. We'll be looking at Carolyn's journey and getting a few tips to successfully finding software. So her journey firstly in finding the software, and then how she makes the most out of the software and focus on some of those features. I'll be giving a high-level overview of volunteer impact, so a short demo of some of the features we speak about and how that looks on the software. And then at the end of the webinar, I'll be giving you a PDU certificate for your attendance today. So stick around to the end so you can receive that. Now, common problems that are faced in a lot of organizations. Obviously, too much data entry. A lot of organizations are using Excel and sheets and that kind of thing to manage their data. Using disconnected tools to do your job. That can be a number of things, such as using too many pieces of software to try and do the same thing or similar things in your organization, or not using the right tool. Not enough time to lead and engage your volunteers. So obviously our software aims to free up time for your organization, make things easier for everyone to manage, and free up time so you can have that one-on-one time with your volunteers. Finding affordable tools leadership will approve. We understand that the approval process can be quite long, can be quite detailed. So we understand how that process is, and of course we do everything we can to help with that. And a big thing in Australia and New Zealand at the moment is insufficient security of your confidential volunteer data. Obviously that is one of the main aspects that we focus on, is security and privacy of information. So that's why our solution for that is volunteer impact. Just a little bit more on security and privacy. So one easy way to tell if a platform or organization has top-notch security is the ISO certification. So ISO 27001 is the world's best-known standard for information security management systems. ISO certification means that the volunteer management service vendor respects all the best practices and principles enshrined in the international standard. Having the actual certificate rather than simply following the guidelines is an important distinction, because it means that the vendor has been audited by an independent body once a year to make sure those standards are met. So that's a very big thing in Australia and New Zealand at the moment, is the ISO certification. And that is something that we do every year, and we proudly promote amongst our software. So, question for the audience. Question number one is, which problem resonates you the most? So is it number one, too much data entry? Number two, using too many disconnected tools? Number three, not enough time to lead and engage with your volunteers? Number four, affordable tools leadership will approve? Or number five, insufficient security of your confidential data? So you can just answer a number, and you can have multiple as well. And then I'll read out what those answers are. So we've got an answer 2 and 4. So too many disconnected tools and affordable tools. 1, 3, and 5. Number 1 and 3 as well. Number 3 again, so probably the most common, not enough time to lead and engage with volunteers. We've got number 2, 3, 4, and 5. So majority of those answers. Number 4 again, 1, 2, and 4. Number 2 and 5. Number 1, 3, and 4. So yeah, very, very different answers there about the issues, but some very common answers as well. So quite interesting that a lot of organizations here today are not having just one problem, they're having multiple problems. So that's an interesting point to take, and that's something that we can delve a little bit into. And of course, that one software volunteer impact aims to alleviate all those problems. Just move to question 2. This is more of a basic one, but how are you managing your volunteers currently? Is it number 1, spreadsheets? Number 2, a volunteer management software? Or number 3, other? So we've got 2 who've answered number 1, who are using spreadsheets. Another 2 answered volunteer management software. Quite a few number 1. Another 4 or 5 answers number 1. That's interesting. One organization is using a mix of spreadsheets and volunteer management software. That's very interesting to hear that. Obviously, the software at the moment is not meeting all the needs, so is forcing spreadsheets to be used as well. Definitely the most common is spreadsheets, which we definitely see a lot in potential organizations that we work with. Obviously, security is a very big issue when working with spreadsheets. That's why volunteer management software is the most secure, and is most important for your privacy as well. So last question, in your opinion, what's most at risk if a change doesn't occur sooner than later? Is it number 1, volunteer turnover, disengagement? Number 2, staff turnover and disengagement? Number 3, wasted budget? Number 4, damage to organization and program reputation? Or number 5, other? So again, number 1 looks like the most common. Number 3 as well. So number 1 and 3, wasted budget and volunteer turnover and disengagement. Someone just answered number 4 and 5, other being poor record keeping. Number 1 again. So number 1 and 3 seem to be the most common. Number 2 has come up a bit as well, staff turnover and disengagement. But as you can see, very diverse range of answers with common problems. Some are the same issues you're having in organizations, but as you can see, very big range of answers with some of these problems. So hopefully with this demonstration, we can combat some of those issues and show you how volunteer impact can solve those issues for you. So thanks everyone for answering those questions. Good to get an insight from your organization. So just to elaborate a little bit on some of those problems, one being the staff turnover, but more than half of all employees are unhappy at work because of the software tools they're using. So that's quite an alarming stat, that almost more than half, sorry, of employees are unhappy because of the tools they're using. That is most likely a mix of using too many tools to do similar things, or too many tools to try and do the same thing, or using things like Excel sheets, those that are not practical to manage your data. But that's a really interesting stat to see. Another stat as well is about 1 in 8 employees has quit a job because of mismatched software. So obviously that is a really tough stat to see, that 1 in 8 people are leaving because they're not using the right software. So that just shows you how important it is to have that right software in the organization. Obviously, we want to keep the staff working at the organization and don't want them to leave because of, you know, a simple thing that can be a simple thing, having that correct software and getting the most out of using that software. So let's get you working with tools that make you feel less frustrated and rather more empowered and productive when you do your job. Now I'm going to hand over to Karen. She's going to talk a little bit about her journey, so we can get some relating data and how that journey was for her.
Hey, thanks everyone. Just a little bit about Nature Foundation. It's been around since the early 80s, and we're really focused on engaging people, resources and good science to conserve precious habitat, as it says there on the slide. So we have we have 9 now nature reserves, and they're all across South Australia at the moment, but we're looking to have more across Australia. And those nature reserves are put aside for conservation reasons, for biodiversity and conservation. So our volunteers spend time up on these reserves. Some are in the far north of South Australia, some are in the southeast of South Australia, and others are closer to metropolitan Adelaide. And Nature Foundation, we've been using it since for a year now. I joined the foundation in June last year, having been a user of Better Impact for 6 years previously in the arts and other conservation organisations, including Zoos SA. And so I knew that I wanted to use Better Impact. They didn't have a formal way of managing volunteers. They had lists in documents and some spreadsheets with contact details. They did record hours, but it was very inconsistent, and it wasn't actually able to record exactly what they had done. And when I did a review and when I actually tried to compile all the data that was existing, it only went back about 6 years. There was nothing else recorded. So there's a whole lot of information that's been missed about our volunteers, or the volunteers that had been working in this informal arrangement, and very little acknowledgement. There would be, you know, face-to-face sort of thank you, but nothing really that helped show the value of what these volunteers had been doing. And also knowing who the volunteers were, that was one of the hard things. So part of that they would have used spreadsheets. I've been in that role. I've been in previous roles. I've worked with spreadsheets as the first thing, not even electronic forms, people sending in paper forms and putting the data in and then finding that half the people don't follow through. So a whole lot of wasted time based on sort of those manual ways. And so Better Impact, I provided a cost benefit analysis of that to leadership in our organisation. And they said, that sounds good, let's go for it. And that's what we did, we rolled it out. Various staff previously had been involved, but it was not consistent. There was no real consistent way of capturing and engaging with the volunteers that we had. So we ended up having, prior to using Better Impact and rolling out our new framework, which was in line with the national standards of volunteering, we had a fairly insular and cliquey group of volunteers, and people trying to get in to do volunteering found that there were barriers because of that format. Really, the volunteers were managing themselves, and the organisation trying to grow the volunteer program didn't have a way of doing that effectively, and it was difficult to break through those existing structures that had formed in an ad hoc way. So, next slide. So we're looking at that lack of system. It was really a lack of system, meant that recording anything to do with volunteers, even their contact details, was challenging. We had old data in spreadsheets and so on. So it was really difficult to even just get a list of who had contributed in the past that was accurate. Determining accountability was also the other thing was difficult. Is what had the volunteers been doing? What had they done? How can we acknowledge? Can we acknowledge that, or can we see the work that they've done? And was it the work that we really needed them to do? So that was one of the other challenges that we wanted to address. And a number of volunteers were overloaded. They were managing the rest of the volunteers because they filled a void that wasn't there. And it became a full-time role for them. And unfortunately, a lot of the work that they did, which was fantastic work, wasn't necessarily aligned to what the foundation needed. So it did create some challenges for the organisation, and the adoption of this formal volunteer program and using Better Impact as the volunteer management system was partly aimed at just having this organisation and allowing us to develop a positive, inclusive, and well-performing volunteer group. Next page, please. Next slide, sorry. So part of that was the foundation had to review its governance as part of across the whole organisation, and as part of the risk management process, it saw that adopting this formal structure based on the national standards and ensuring that it had the appropriate policies and procedures attached to the operations, it just ensured that they reduced their risk. And as mentioned, things like even the data, being able to have the data in a system that is rigorous and not going to be data, they're not going to be data breaches, was part of this risk management. So having a program like Better Impact that offers that kind of security was really, really important. The program focused on working with our staff to review the type of activities that we'd want to be able to offer to volunteers. And the key thing there was about purposeful activities and making sure they're aligned to the work that we do. And we talk about, we've established this phrase that volunteers are there to support, complement and extend our work. They're not there to replace paid people. They're not there to make, to decide what happens, but they are definitely involved in what activities take place. So was there someone talking? It's still a work in progress. We're working through the ways that we can involve our volunteers more in our science programs, for instance, even though they may not have a science background. So it's about how much training and support that we can give them to empower them to do that wider range of activities, as well as supporting or recognising that sometimes we'll get some volunteers who do have these science skills that may be on a journey towards paid work, but we're willing to be flexible, I guess, to ensure that we can utilise their skills while they are able to offer them, and hopefully, though, later in life they may also decide to continue that. The diversity of our team is growing because we've got a system that allows us to be able to see the demographics, check what type of, the type of applicants that we're getting. We can adjust from the knowledge that we can get from our database about our volunteers, what skill sets they have, what work-life balances, work-life history they have, and how they may, where their interests are, so that they can we can match them to that. Next slide, please. So why did I select volunteer impact? Well, I had a good experience with it, and I had been on that journey where I had started with spreadsheets and then some internal databases that were created for another organisation. That was a step up because at least we had an electronic form. But when the first time I used Better Impact and got to see what it could do was in 2017, 2018, when I was working in the arts. And it allowed me to see how I could dedicate more of my time to engaging my volunteers than just doing admin and copious amounts of rostering, which may or may not have been effective at the time via spreadsheets and other things. So it's about creating a system that allowed me to do all the things that I need to do in the job in terms of admin, but also to allow me to engage with people to come on board. And that's the way I've approached it with Nature Foundation, is to ensure right from the very start of when they express interest, they are learning Better Impacts. So, for instance, the way that I onboard them, they can express interest via our website, and that goes straight into their My Impact or Better Impact. And they then have a profile, and we have the basic information, their contact details, where they are, and their interests, what are they interested in, and a little bit of what their history might be in terms of volunteering or working and doing something in conservation or science. And then I then ask them, and they get an auto response for that, and then I send them an email to ask them to sign up for a meeting. That's a telephone meeting where I can do a 15-minute chat with them to see that if we're a match for each other, are their interests and what we can offer a match? Do their values and our values line up? Those kind of things, and talk about the typical availability and the typical types of roles we currently have, so that they can see whether that's going to work for them. And that 15-minute conversation is really important. For all that information, can we match them? Yes, most people do match because they've got information at the start when they express interest about the types of things we offer anyway. And then at the same time, they're learning how to use the roster system because they've signed up for an assignment to ring me. So what I try to do is right from the start is encourage them to use the system that we're going to use. That's not to say we haven't had people with real hesitancy who may not be as digitally literate, but what we do is we offer extra support. So, if they can come into the office, I'll show them. If I can talk them through on the telephone, I'll do that. Obviously we do some training documents and things that we can provide. And and that information is also on the help channels that Better Impact offers, which is really comprehensive. So for me, that's one of the onboarding process is really straightforward. I've got it set up so that they don't do everything in the one go. The last thing you want to do is, I think, for a volunteer is come and say they feel like they have to do everything and they have to fill out copious amounts of forms before they even engage with us. So that's why I have an expression of interest. Then I engage them personally with a phone call, and then we talk about what they need to do for compliance. So things like working with children checks, police checks, and then our e-learning for induction and volunteer agreement. So that's sort of the onboarding, and it's streamlined and it's very manageable. And the great thing about Better Impact is once you've got their details, you can send groups of people emails or individual emails. You can use templates that you can create, and just saves time for that bread and butter admin that you do regularly. And that time is really important because I can put that back into the personal engagement, which is the bit that I like doing. That's the bit that drew me into volunteer coordination as a career. And that part for me is really satisfying. So trying to get the admin part as efficient as possible gives me time for that personal stuff, which is great. The other part, in terms of the rostering, we can roster based on, at the moment we offer 4 categories of volunteering. One's sort of conservation, one's infrastructure support, another one is called remote reserve support for our remote reserves that also have visitors and tourists that come through. And then we have office-based projects, and we get admin or science-based type people wanting to do those types of activities. So the rostering helps us, helps me in particular, to be able to report back to our leadership how many volunteers, how many hours have they contributed, and to what category, but also to what activities that we've had within that. So that's really critical in terms of measuring the impact of volunteers that has on our organisation. And as a not-for-profit, one of the important things that we do to our member base and the public is report on our impact, and that's so the volunteers' impact is being reported regularly as part of all the other aspects of the impact of our organisation and its programs. So that's really, really positive. And setting up rosters is great. It's great that you can, there's a lot of ways that you can set them up so that groups of different volunteers can see some things because they've got the skill set, and other groups can see maybe all the other things. It's just, you can, tailor it really well for things that are maybe a little bit more exclusive based on skill or knowledge, versus things that are more open to sort of anyone in volunteering can manage that with the rostering system and using things like qualifications to show things. So it's really good. The other thing, communication, that comes back to what I was saying before, is that I can look up any of my volunteers. I can see their email history, what I've sent them, what information I've sent them, to see where they're at. I can do big group ones. I can do just send a text message or an email to those that are rostered. So the flexibility, it's all in there and it's all captured, so I know where things are. I don't have to remember everything about every volunteer. I can just go to their profile and see what engagement level I've had with them. And that communication is really important. And the last bit that I really I'm using a lot is the e-learning modules. Creating those have been really important. We have a lot of volunteers that are interstate or remote or live in regional or rural areas, and so they can't come to our face-to-face training sessions. We do have them, but we record them now, and then we can set them up as an e-learning and allow them to complete that remotely, which is once they complete it, it updates their qualification, and that may then open up access to a whole lot of other rosters or activities that they can get involved in because they've got that qualification. And that kind of thing really does help them. They know that what they're being asked to do is important, because it's the training is usually something around safety or doing something in the correct manner, and we can see that they've completed those. And then when they do go out to our reserves to do activities, they might get a refresher or a quick work health safety briefing with staff on site, but they've already got the background information. They've had a chance to consider what they may or maybe need to do while they're on reserve. So to me, I've been really happy with Better Impact. I've every year I find other ways within the program to make things even more efficient and more, I guess, accessible for people. Trying to remove some of the technology can be a barrier for some people, so trying to make it as easy as possible, and that sort of but also as self-directed as possible, so that they get a chance to get the confidence in technology to feel that, oh, this works for me, I can do this. And for their convenience, they can find out about all the rosters and all the different things that are going on, from a self-driven point of view, rather than being, bombarded with emails saying this is on, this is on, this is on. It's all in the roster, and we just, remind them from time to time that there's opportunities or new opportunities that have come up. So I think I've covered most of my examples, but I'd really highly recommend this program. I have tried other ones, but I've found this one to be the one that's most sort of intuitive and easy to self-teach, as well as it's got all the wonderful, great support mechanisms with the Better Impact TV and other library resources of help, plus chat lines, plus the consultants who are really, really responsive. So yeah, I highly recommend it, and we've really benefited from having it. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. That was amazing insight on how you're using the software at the moment and your journey to get to that point. So I appreciate your time today. Carolyn will be sticking around for Q&A at the end, if you have any questions you'd like to ask as well. Perfect. So I'm just going to move into a demo. So I'm going to touch on some of the things that Carolyn mentioned, and some of those features. Firstly, I'm going to kind of look at the onboarding process. So this page you see here, this is what we call the landing page or the advertisement page. So this is usually linked to your website. It can be sent out via a link or a QR code as well. This can potentially be the first thing that a volunteer will see when they're interested in volunteering for your organization. So all this data is live. You can have different opportunities that will pop up for them. They can click on that and see more info. They can see different shifts as well, or special events that you have coming up. Your social media can also be connected. Once a volunteer is interested in applying, they click on this fill in application page. This will take them to the page here when they're basically creating an account with Better Impact. So they will do that themselves. There is an option to do an import when you're first starting, so you can import your volunteers, and a username and password is created for them. In that case, they'd be logging in. There's also an option to use Better Impact with multiple organizations. So if they're already using Better Impact with another organization, they can log in with that same username and password, and use that for multiple organizations. This page is also an opportunity to have specific policies, any major information that you want to mention at the top of this page. A good example is, please have your Working with Children check ready to upload during that application process. Now, once they click on the form there, Sorry, 2 secs. That will take them to the application form. Now, the application form is 2 pages. Page number 1 is all the basic information. So that would be name, address, email address, phone number. Page number 2 is the really customizable, intricate details that you want in that application form. So this can be general availability. They can let you know when they're available. They can basically tick certain opportunities that they're interested in volunteering for. Of course, this is then searchable inside the system. And then they get to the qualifications and the custom fields. So qualifications, they can be drop downs, they can be date fields, tick boxes, different options to select. And of course, these expiry dates will be tracked inside the system. As Carolyn mentioned, this can be either an express of interest or this can be an application. Basically, you have 3 different application forms you can use in each account, and you can set that up and customize that process for how you need it. Now, the custom fields inside this application form can essentially be anything you want them to be. So this might be for information you want to do reporting. It can be file fields if you need them to upload their driver's license, their background check, anything like that. Or can be drop downs. Anything you want in the system you can create as a custom field. There's no limits to how many you have in the system as well. These little flags in the system as well basically demonstrate that this field is a mandatory field. So the volunteer won't be able to submit until they have completed that field in the system. You can also have questions like what languages you speak, what references you have, and certain agreements, acknowledgements that can be tracked in the system as well. So once that application is submitted, they'll either get a message on the screen here or an automated email to let them know the next steps. So the admins in the system will get a notification to let them know that there is a new applicant in the system. Most of the time, the applicant will go into the applicant status here. That's basically if you need to do any vetting or need to look at that application and make sure they're the right fit. That process can be skipped. If you want all applicants to basically be accepted right into the program, you can configure that so that they go directly into your accepted status. We've also got other statuses like in process. That's if you want to organize an interview. Inactive, if they're having a short or long-term break. And archived, which has its own sub-statuses, rejected, dismissed, resigned. A number of different sub-statuses you can use for reporting. Now, once the application is made, a profile will be created for the volunteer. This will obviously have all the information that was provided in that application. You can see all the contact information, all their contributions once they do log hours and by activity. And you can see different badges, which is a really popular system with volunteers at the moment. You can create your own badges in the system. This can be based on hours, years of service, even training and qualifications. That will be shown on their profile here, but also the volunteer's profile. Admins can edit contact info. Volunteers can also log on and edit their contact information as well. Custom fields, qualifications, and their availability, general interest can be managed from the profile as well as the option to communicate. Carolyn mentioned earlier that the email and text message history is saved in the system. So basically that is saved on the profile of the volunteer. That's also an overall history that's saved. So you can get an overall view of everything saved in the system. There's also the option to do confidential note logs that volunteers won't be able to see. It's just for the other admins. So that's obviously if you have a phone call with them and need to save any notes against their profile, that's an option as well. You can roster or schedule volunteers directly from their profile. So this is usually quite handy if you're doing regulars in the system. An example would be you can filter down the shift if they're working every Monday and Friday. Every Monday and Friday shift will come up. You can tick all the shifts and you can sign up or assign that volunteer. So that's a good way to basically get in your regulars into that roster and then start building your roster that way as well. A schedule can be found from their profile. This is a nice organized monthly schedule that they can see all their shifts coming up for that month. This can be seen in the volunteer's profile as well. On top of that, the volunteer can also connect their personal calendar, so Outlook, Gmail, or Yahoo, to the software, so that if any shifts are changed or anything's updated, they'll get notified on their phone. And in some cases, there's no need to sign into the software. You can see their hours as well. If you're using the clock in, clock out system, an admin can actually come into the system and start that clock for them. Important to note that anything a volunteer can do in the system, an admin can do on their behalf. It has that option, including the hours or the time log entries, that kind of information. Now, the front page makes things easier to navigate. It has things automatically tracked in the system, such as birthdays and anniversaries, how many years they've been volunteering in the system. You can easily send an email, select a template as well. And that code there will basically be the first name of the volunteer. So you can send out the bulk emails very easily from the system. On top of that, there's also some other alerts on the system. So we mentioned before the qualifications. If they have an expiry date, that will be tracked in the system here. It will show you which qualifications are expired and need updating. As well as that, we have custom field approvals. So this is basically any field that you create in the system as a custom field. You can add an approval step. So some of these, you might see that there is some file fields. You can make them have an approval step. So the admin must come in and basically view those before that's approved in the system. And obviously they come in all at the one point. So you can see what needs to be approved before it's made official. As well as that, we have hours approval. So before that, those hours are made official, you have the option to make that approval step mandatory. So you would have to come in, approve that before that's made official as well. If you're using the clock in, clock out system, so that's basically either a QR code a volunteer uses to clock in and then clock out, that will let you know how many volunteers are on the clock. There's also the option to have just a login from an iPad or a desktop. They can clock in that way as well. You've also got some things on the front page, just as comparisons. So this is basically just an overview of your reporting. So you can have this on your front page if this is important. Of course, download this chart as well if you need to. Newsletters as well can be seen from this page, and that can be multiple newsletters you can add on top of each other if you need to, but that newsletter will be seen on the volunteer's profile. And I'll just touch on a couple more things so we have some time for some questions at the end. Carolyn mentioned the different activities and how they're created. Basically, the activities are the first step for creating your schedules, creating the different roles in your organization. And this example can show you that the schedule can be created in advance, even a few years in advance, if you need to as well. So you've got the different shifts. You can add a maximum number of volunteers. So in this case, it's one. So that basically means when one volunteer signs up, that shift will auto lock so that no other volunteers can sign up. And that shift is essentially locked in. So on top of that as well, Carolyn mentioned this about the visibility of some of the activities and the shifts. So basically what you can do is you can make the activity only visible to those who are obviously accepted to volunteer, but also those who are qualified. So that means that these qualifications that you've selected in this specific activity, so we've got a few here, the age range, the background check, agreements, how much can you lift comfortably. So as you can see, it's a big range of qualifications that you can use. These basically mean that if you don't have this qualification, you won't be able to sign up for this shift, or you won't be able to sign up for this activity. So certain things like the e-learning training, once that is completed, and if that is a qualification that needs to be done, that will automatically make the activity or the shift show up for that volunteer. So that just incentivizes doing that training, making sure those qualifications are properly either uploaded or ticked inside the software. And that just makes sure that all the boxes are ticked, you're getting the correct volunteers for the correct roles. One other thing that can be used in the activities is the feedback fields. So this is essentially questions that you ask volunteers once they log their hours or once they clock out for their shift. So this is really important for reporting, really important to see, satisfaction of volunteers, seeing how many inquiries they have throughout the day, and of course the really important stuff like the incidents, if there's any incidents report as well. So those questions, as you can see here, there's 4 of the total feedback fields selected for this activity. Similar to the qualifications, you can select which feedback fields are connected to which activity. So as you can see, you can create different activities in different categories, and those can even be training, interviews, any information or any events and any shifts that the volunteer can sign up for as well. I'm just conscious of time, so I'll head back to the PowerPoints, and then we're almost ready for the question time as well. So now that you've heard from Carolyn's story and learned a little bit about volunteer impact, I'll share a little bit of background about Better Impact. So Better Impact actually started by a fluke. Our CEO Tony, had a passion project of building a web-based volunteer management software solution specifically for a residential hospice. He founded. Basically, that birthed the beginnings of a global We're Here to Help company. So this was all the way back in the year 2000 that this was created. So we've been active over 20 years. We're a small company with a global impact. We have offices in UK, Canada, US, and Australia. We've got customers all around the globe. We specialize in volunteer management software, volunteer impact. We also provide other modules, donor impact, client impact, and member impact. They all integrate with volunteer impact. So if you do need to add any of those integrations, that is possible all in the one database. and we're very proud of the reviews that we receive from the company. So you can actually have a look at those reviews. Basically, we've got a 4.8 rating at the moment with our reviews on the Trustpilot reviews. So we're really proud of those reviews we have. A big part of that is the support that Andy and the team provide, making sure that the transition and that implementation is as smooth as possible, and also that security and privacy that we make, number one priority, as well as support, and to make that transition and use of the software as easy as possible.